The human fleet that arrived at the Vega system was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The ships moved in ways that defied understanding, their hulls shimmering like water under starlight. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the UHS Retribution, watching the Devourer harvest fleet through his viewscreen. "They're feeding on the fourth planet," reported Captain Thompson from his ship. 3 million beings lived there yesterday. Now there's nothing but empty cities. Morrison's jaw tightened. "Then we stop them here. All ships, prepare for phase shift assault." The Council observers aboard the human ships watched in confusion as the fleet seemed to prepare for a suicidal charge. The Devourers had proven they could adapt to any strategy within hours. Every sensible military mind said the only hope was a careful, measured approach, but humans had never been sensible. "Phase shift drive active," announced Lieutenant Emma Rodriguez from her position at the tactical station. "All ships report ready." "Remember," Morrison said over the fleet communication system, "we're not here to fight fair. We're here to win. Execute." The human fleet vanished. For a moment, the space around Vega was empty except for the massive Devourer ships. Then the humans reappeared, but not where anyone expected. They materialized inside the enemy formation, their weapons already firing. Phase shift torpedoes passed through the Devourer hulls like they were made of air, then exploded inside the ships. The organic vessels twisted and screamed as their internal structures were torn apart by weapons that couldn't be stopped by any shield or armor. "Impossible," whispered one of the Council observers. "They're attacking from inside the enemy ships." "That's because we learned to fight dirty," replied Commander Ryan Mitchell, whose black-uniformed soldiers were already boarding the nearest Devourer vessel. "When you're fighting for survival, you use every advantage you can get." The battle lasted only 30 minutes. When it ended, the entire Devourer harvest fleet was dead, drifting in pieces through the Vega system. The human ships had taken almost no damage. How did they do it? Asked Admiral Vexlon, staring at the destruction in amazement. "They didn't give us time to adapt," said Dr. Kevin Adams, monitoring the battle from his laboratory ship. "The Devourers learn by watching and copying. But you can't copy what you can't understand, and you can't understand what happens too fast to see." The victory at Vega was followed by triumphs at Delta Pavonis, Wolf 359, and the Rigel sector. Each battle saw the humans using new technologies and tactics that the Devourers couldn't predict. Ships that could exist in 2 dimensions at once, weapons that fired backwards through time, soldiers who moved like ghosts through solid matter. But the humans' greatest weapon wasn't their technology. It was their minds. "The Devourers have one critical weakness," explained Dr. Rachel Martinez during a strategy meeting. "They think all. Species are logical. They expect enemies to act in predictable ways based on survival instincts. But humans have never been logical. We're the species that runs toward danger instead of away from it," added Dr. Nathan Clark. "We jump on grenades to save strangers. We fly into black holes because someone has to do it. We don't make sense, and that's our strength." The final battle came at Proxima Centauri, where the largest Devourer fleet ever assembled prepared to assault the galaxy's main shipyards. Over 3,000 enemy vessels gathered in formation, their biohulls pulsing with the absorbed knowledge of dozens of conquered species. Admiral Morrison's response was to attack with fewer than 200 ships. "Sir," Captain Thompson said over the communication link, "the odds are 15 to 1 against us." "Good," Morrison replied. "If the odds were even, it wouldn't be a fair fight." The Battle of Proxima Centauri became the stuff of legend. Human ships phased in and out of reality, striking from impossible angles. When conventional weapons failed, they used unconventional ones. When strategy failed, they used chaos. When logic failed, They used madness. Commander Mitchell's Shadow Corps didn't just board enemy ships, they infiltrated them while invisible, sabotaged critical systems, and disappeared before the Devourers knew they were there. Dr. Adams' quantum communicators allowed perfect coordination between human forces, while the Devourers struggled to understand how their enemies could act as one mind. The turning point came when the Devourers tried to adapt to human tactics by copying them. But human tactics weren't based on logic or training. They were based on emotion, instinct, and the willingness to do whatever it took to win. "They're trying to fight like us," Lieutenant Rodriguez observed, watching the enemy ships attempt to use phase shift technology, "but they don't understand the mindset behind it." "You can't copy courage," Morrison said. "You can't adapt to sacrifice. And you can't learn to be human." The battle raged for 14 hours. Ships burned and died on both sides. The space around Proxima Centauri became a graveyard of twisted metal and organic matter. But slowly, steadily, the humans began to win. The climax came when the UHS Retribution, her hull breached and her crew fighting fires throughout the ship, made a direct run at the Devourer command vessel. Morrison stood on his burning bridge, calmly giving orders as his ship fell apart around him. "All hands, this is the Admiral," he announced over the ship's communication system. "It's been an honor serving with you. Emma, take us in." "Sir, the phase shift drive is overloading," Rodriguez reported. "If we activate it now, it'll create a cascade reaction." "I know," Morrison said quietly. "That's the point." The Retribution's final charge took her directly into the heart of the Devourer fleet. When her phase shift drive exploded, it created a tear in space itself. The explosion consumed everything within 1,000 kilometers, including the enemy command ship and most of their fleet. The remaining Devourers, suddenly leaderless and confused, began to retreat. But the humans weren't done. Every ship, every soldier, every weapon humanity possessed was thrown into the final assault. The enemy that had consumed 1,000 civilizations was driven back, beaten, and sent fleeing into the darkness between galaxies. When the smoke cleared, the galaxy was free. The Devourers were gone, their threat ended by an enemy they couldn't understand or defeat. The cost had been high, thousands of human lives, including Admiral Morrison himself. But the price of defeat would have been the end of everything. In the aftermath, the Galactic Council chambers were different. The seat reserved for humanity was no longer empty. The beings who had once voted for human exile now listened carefully to every word spoken by their human representatives. "The question before us," said the council leader, "is how we move forward from this point." Dr. Lisa Carter, now serving as humanity's permanent ambassador, stood to address the assembly. "5 years ago, you banished us for being too aggressive, too unpredictable, too dangerous. When extinction threatened, it was that same aggression that saved you. Our unpredictability that won the war." She paused, looking around the chamber. "We didn't fight the Devourers to earn our way back into your good graces. We fought them because it was the right thing to do. That's what humans do. We fight for what's right, even when it costs us everything." The vote to readmit humanity to the council was unanimous. But the real change went deeper than politics. The galaxy had learned that diversity of thought was essential for survival. That sometimes the best defense was a good offense. That peace wasn't about avoiding conflict, but about making sure you were strong enough to win when conflict came. In the years that followed, human military advisors worked alongside alien forces. Human scientists shared their knowledge freely. Human teachers helped other species understand that being different wasn't something to fear, but something to celebrate. And in the darkness of the Outer Rim, Haven Station remained as a monument to human determination. The memorial wall in the station's central plaza bore the names of all who had died in the war, with Admiral Morrison's name etched in gold at the top dot below it, a simple message. They banished us for being human. We saved them by staying human. Galaxy was safer now, protected by those who understood that sometimes you had to fight for peace. The Council had learned that strength came not from eliminating differences, but from embracing them. And humanity had learned that exile wasn't punishment. It was preparation for the moment when the galaxy would need them most. The stars themselves seemed brighter, as if the universe had remembered that even in its darkest places, there were those willing to stand against the dark. After all, that's what humans do. The first warning came from a small outpost on the edge of Council space. Gamma Station was a lonely place, far from the busy trade routes and beautiful planets. Only 50 beings lived there, watching the empty darkness for signs of danger. On a quiet Tuesday morning, their messages to the galaxy simply stopped. Ambassador Zethkar barely looked up from his paperwork when the news reached him. "Probably just broken equipment," he said with a wave of his crystal hand. "Those frontier stations break down all the time." But when 3 more stations went silent in the next day, the Council began to worry. Emergency meetings were called. Worried voices filled the great chamber as representatives from dozens of species tried to understand what was happening. "Send a ship to investigate," ordered the Council leader, its energy form flickering with concern. "We need to know what's going on out there." Captain Veltar of the Nexus Fleet took his ship in true to the silent stations. What they found made his blood run cold. The stations were still there, floating in space like metal ghosts. But everything inside them was gone. Not destroyed, not burned, but simply missing. "The buildings are empty," Veltar reported back to the Council. "Every living thing has vanished. Plants, animals, people, all gone. But the stations themselves are untouched." "What could do such a thing?" asked the snake-like ambassador from Proxima. Before anyone could answer, the sky above the Council world began to change. Dark shapes appeared between the stars, growing larger by the minute. The ships were unlike anything in the galaxy's records. They looked alive, with surfaces that moved like skin and lights that pulsed like heartbeats. The first message came in a language that no translator could understand. But the meaning was clear enough when the words finally made sense. "We are the Devourers. We have traveled between galaxies for 1,000,000 years. We have consumed 1,000 worlds and absorbed the knowledge of countless species. Your time has come. Submit to us, and your death will be quick. Fight us, and we will make you suffer." The Council chamber erupted in panic. Some species wanted to negotiate. Others called for immediate war. But Ambassador Zethkar stood up and spoke the words that everyone was thinking. "We need help. Our fleets are not strong enough for this." The first battle happened at the Kepler defense grid, where Admiral Vexlon commanded the largest fleet. In Council space, 200 ships formed a battle line, their weapons charged and ready. The crews were confident. They had the best technology, the finest training, and the backing of the entire galaxy. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, only 12 Council ships remained. "They're not just beating us," Exlon's final message said. "They're learning from us. Every weapon we use, every tactic we try, they copy it and make it better. By the end of the fight, they were using our own strategies against us." The Devourers moved through Council space like a plague. Star system after star system fell to their hunger. Billions of beings simply vanished, consumed by the alien fleet. The survivors told horrible stories of ships that ate everything living, of creatures that could change shape at will, of minds that could steal thoughts and memories. 3 months after the invasion began, the Council faced a terrible truth. They were losing. Their finest generals had been defeated. Their strongest fleets had been destroyed. The enemy was adapting to every weapon, every strategy, every plan they could think of. General Korth of the Andromedan Defense. Force spoke the words that no one wanted to hear. We're running out of options. We need warriors who don't think like U.S. We need fighters who are unpredictable, who take risks, who don't follow the rules. The council chamber fell silent. Everyone knew what he meant, but no one wanted to say it. Finally, the council leader spoke in its wind-like voice. You're talking about the humans. Yes, Korth replied. The same humans we exiled for being too violent, too dangerous, too unpredictable. Those are exactly the qualities we need now. Ambassador Zethkar's crystal body flickered with anger. The humans were banished for good reason. They cause chaos wherever they go. They fight first and think later. They endanger everyone around them. And right now, Korth said quietly, that might be our only hope. The debate went on for hours. Some council members refused to even consider asking humanity for help. Others argued that the humans might not even answer after the way they had been treated. But as more reports came in of fallen worlds and lost fleets, the choice became clear: pride or survival. Those were the only options left. The message was sent on an old frequency that hadn't been used in 5 years. It traveled through the darkness to the outer rim, where humanity waited in exile. The words were simple and desperate. The Galactic Council requests the immediate assistance of humanity in defending against an existential threat to all life in the galaxy. All previous sanctions are hereby suspended. The response came 12 hours later. It was brief, transmitted from somewhere in the void, and signed by Admiral Jake Morrison. We're on our way. But before the human fleet could arrive, the Devourers struck again. This time they hit the Centauri system, home to 15 billion beings. The defense fleet was ready for them, using new tactics based on the lessons learned from previous battles. It didn't matter. The Devourers had learned those lessons too. The battle was a massacre. Admiral Korvix, the Council's best tactical mind, watched his fleet get torn apart by enemies who seemed to know his every move before he made it. They're inside our heads, he reported in his final transmission. They know what we're going to do before we do it. They're not just copying our technology. They're copying our thoughts. The news of Centauri's fall reached the Council just as the first human ships appeared on the edge of the galaxy. The vessels that emerged from the outer rim were not what anyone expected. Gone were the bulky, practical ships of 5 years ago. These new vessels were sleek and strange, their hulls seeming to bend light around them. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of his flagship, the UHS Retribution. The years of exile had changed him. His hair was white now, his face marked with lines of determination and loss. But his eyes still burned with the fire that had made him a legend. Admiral Morrison, Ambassador Zethkar's voice came over the communication system. The Council is grateful for your quick response to our request. Morrison's laugh was cold. Request? That's an interesting way to describe a desperate cry for help. Dr. Lisa Carter, now serving as humanity's war minister, stepped forward. Show us what we're dealing with. The briefing that followed painted a picture of horror. 14 star systems consumed. 3 billion beings harvested. Enemy fleets that learned and adapted faster than anything the galaxy had ever seen. What's their weakness? Asked Captain Alex Thompson, who now commanded the human battle fleet. We haven't found one, Admiral Exlon admitted. They adapt too quickly. Any advantage we gain disappears within hours. Thompson smiled, but it wasn't a nice smile. And we don't give them time to adapt. We hit them so hard and so fast that learning becomes impossible. The first human engagement was about to begin. The galaxy was about to learn what 5 years of exile had done to humanity. The Devourers had consumed 1,000 civilizations, absorbed the knowledge of countless species, and never met an enemy they couldn't defeat. They were about to meet their first. 5 years had passed since the last human ship disappeared into the darkness beyond the outer rim. The galaxy had changed during that time. Trade was better than ever before. Wars between species had almost stopped completely. The Galactic Council met in their great chamber and smiled at each other, proud of the peace they had created. The exile of humanity was the right choice, Ambassador Zethkar announced during one of their meetings. His crystal body glowed with satisfaction. Look at how calm everything has become. No more sudden attacks, no more broken treaties, no more chaos. The other council members agreed. They had almost forgotten about the humans entirely. Sometimes a merchant would ask about the old human colonies, or a historian would mention the species that once lived among them. But most beings in the galaxy acted as if humans had never existed at all. They had no idea what was happening in the void between stars. Deep in the asteroid field known as the Graveyard, something impossible was taking shape. Admiral Jake Morrison stood in the observation deck of Haven Station, watching construction crews work on the outer hull. The station was huge, bigger than any city on Earth, and it was growing larger every day. "Progress report," Morrison said, as Dr. Lisa Carter joined him at the window. "We now have 450,000 people living on the station," Carter replied, reading from her tablet. "The farming levels are producing more food than we can eat. The factories are running at full power, and the children born here are growing up healthy and strong." Morrison nodded. The children were important. Kids who had never known the galaxy's rejection, who saw the void as home instead of punishment. They were the future of humanity, and they were being raised by people who had learned to be hard. "What about the research projects?" Morrison asked. Carter's eyes lit up. "That's where things get interesting. Come with me." They walked through corridors filled with busy people. Human engineers worked alongside human scientists, human doctors, and human teachers. Everyone had a job to do, and everyone did it well. The exile had taught humanity one important lesson. They could only rely on themselves. They stopped at a laboratory where Dr. Kevin Adams was working with a device that looked like a metal box covered in blinking lights. Adams was young, maybe 30 years old, but he had already become the most important scientist on the station. "Show the Admiral what you've discovered," Carter said. Adams grinned and activated the device. Suddenly, Morrison heard a voice speaking clearly in his head. It was the voice of Dr. Rachel Martinez, who was working in a laboratory on the other side of the station. "The quantum communication system is working perfectly," Martinez's voice said inside Morrison's mind. "I can speak to you instantly, no matter how far apart we are." Morrison was amazed. "How is this possible?" "Quantum entanglement," Adams explained. "Two particles that are connected at the atomic level. When one changes, the other changes instantly, even if they're on opposite sides of the galaxy. We can now talk to any human ship anywhere in space without delay." They moved to another laboratory where Dr. Nathan Clark was working on something even more incredible. Clark was older, maybe 50, with gray hair and tired eyes. But when he talked about his work, he became excited like a child. "We call it phase shift technology," Clark explained as he showed them a small spaceship model. "Watch this." He pressed a button, and the model ship seemed to become transparent. Then it moved right through the solid metal table, as if the table wasn't there. "The ship exists in a different dimension for a few seconds," Clark continued. "It can pass through walls, ignore gravity, and travel faster than anything the galaxy has ever seen. A ship using phase shift can appear anywhere, anytime, without warning." Morrison stared at the demonstration. "How many ships can we equip with this technology?" "Every ship in our fleet within 6 months," Clark replied. "But there's more. We can make weapons that work the same way. Imagine a missile that can pass through enemy shields and explode inside their ship. While the scientists worked their magic, other humans were busy with different projects. Commander Ryan Mitchell had been training soldiers in the deepest levels of Haven Station. His Ghost Battalion had grown into an entire army of fighters who wore black uniforms and moved like shadows. "We're not the same species that got kicked out 5 years ago," Mitchell told his troops during a training exercise. "We're harder now. We're smarter. We're more dangerous than anything the galaxy has ever seen." The training was intense. Soldiers learned to fight in zero gravity, to survive in the vacuum of space, and to use weapons that could cut through the strongest alien armor. But more importantly, they learned to think like humans, to be unpredictable, to take risks, and to never give up. "The aliens think they know how to fight," Mitchell explained to his newest recruits. "They follow rules, they use standard tactics, they try to minimize casualties. But humans don't fight by the rules. We fight to win, no matter what it costs." Not everyone on Haven Station was focused on war. In the civilian areas, families were trying to build normal lives. Pete Johnson now worked in the agricultural section, growing food in the massive greenhouse domes. His wife Mary taught school to the children, and their daughter Susan had made friends with kids from all over the galaxy. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if we had stayed," Mary said to Pete one evening as they watched their daughter play with other children. "We would have become like them," Pete replied, "following their rules, thinking their thoughts, being afraid to take risks. Out here, we can be ourselves." "I miss the real sky," Mary admitted. "I miss the feeling of wind and rain." Pete put his arm around his wife. "Maybe someday we'll have that again. But for now, we're free." The children of Haven Station were indeed different from their parents. They had never known the fear of alien judgment or the shame of exile. To them, a void was not a punishment, but an opportunity. They learned to work in zero gravity as easily as walking. They studied subjects that would have been forbidden in council space. They grew up believing that humans were not inferior to other species, but simply different. Dr. Rachel Martinez had been working on something special for these children. She had created a learning system that connected human minds directly to computer networks. The children could access vast amounts of information instantly, learn new skills in hours instead of years, and solve problems that would challenge adult scientists. "We're creating a generation of humans who are smarter than anyone who came before," Martinez explained to Morrison during one of his visits to the education center. "These children will be able to think faster, learn quicker, and adapt to anything the galaxy throws at them." Morrison watched the children at work. They sat quietly with metal headbands on their foreheads, their eyes closed, but their minds racing through mathematics, science, history, and tactics. When they opened their eyes, they knew things that had taken their parents years to learn. "Are we changing what it means to be human?" Morrison asked. "No," Martinez replied. "We're becoming more human than we ever were before. We're becoming what we were always meant to be." As the 5th year of exile ended, humanity had transformed itself. They had technology that the galaxy had never seen. They had soldiers who could fight in ways that no alien could predict. They had children who were smarter than any generation before them. Most importantly, they had learned to work together without the guidance of other species. Every decision was made by humans, for humans. Every solution was found by human minds working together. Every problem was solved by human determination. The galaxy had intended exile to be humanity's punishment. Instead, it had become their greatest gift. In the darkness between stars, they had found something more valuable than any planet or trade route. They had found themselves, but deep in the void beyond even the outer rim, something else was stirring. Ancient enemies were moving between galaxies, heading toward the lights of civilization. The galaxy's time of peace was about to end, and when it did, they would need warriors who could think like humans. Whether they knew it or not, the countdown to humanity's return had already begun. The massive chamber buzzed with angry voices. Hundreds of alien beings sat in tall chairs that formed a circle around the center of the room. Their eyes all focused on one man standing alone in the middle. Admiral Jake Morrison wore his blue uniform with pride, but his face showed no fear. He had been a soldier for 30 years, and he would not bow to these creatures, no. Humanity has gone too far this time, shouted Ambassador Zethkar. His crystal body glowed bright red with anger. They attacked the Krillian fleet without asking. U.S. first. They think they can make war without following the rules. The other aliens nodded and made sounds of agreement. Some looked like giant insects, others like walking plants, and a few had no solid form at all. But they all shared one thing. They were angry at the humans. Dr. Lisa Carter stood up from her seat near the back of the room. She was the only other human present, and she looked small compared to the alien giants around her. The Krillians were taking slaves, she said in a clear voice. They were stealing people from their homes and forcing them to work in mines. Someone had to stop them. That someone should have been us, hissed a snake-like creature from the planet Nexus. Not. A young species that barely knows how to travel between stars. Humans have been in space for only 200 years. You are children playing with weapons you do not understand. The leader of the council, a being of pure energy that glowed white, raised what might have been a hand. The room fell silent. We have heard enough, it said in a voice like wind through trees. The vote will now begin. Jake Morrison watched as each alien cast their vote. Red lights meant guilty, blue lights meant innocent. The board behind him filled with red as species after species voted against humanity. Only 3 blue lights appeared. The dolphins from Earth's oceans, the peaceful farmers from Kepler 442b, and surprisingly, the warrior race from Vega Prime. The vote is complete, announced the energy being. By a count of 47-3, humanity is found guilty of breaking galactic law. The punishment is exile from all council space. Captain Alex Thompson sat in his command chair aboard the human ship UHS Defiance. The ship orbited the council world, waiting for news. His communication officer, a young woman named Emma Rodriguez, turned to face him with worry in her eyes. "Sir, we have a message from the council," she said. "It's the formal notice." Thompson took the data pad and read it aloud to his crew. All human ships and colonies must leave council space within 30 days. Any human found in council territory after that time will be considered an enemy. The galaxy has spoken. Emma's hands tightened into fists. "Captain, we have over 12 million people living on 17 different worlds. Some of those families have been there for 50 years. Where will they go?" "I don't know," Thompson said quietly. "But we have our orders. Start sending messages to all human settlements. Tell them to pack only what they need. The evacuation begins now." The next few weeks were chaos. Giant transport ships arrived at human colonies across the galaxy. On the farming world of New Dallas, families like Pete and Mary Johnson watched their crops burn as they prepared to leave. Pete had spent 20 years building his farm with his own hands. Now he had to abandon it all. "It's not fair," Mary said as she packed their few belongings. "We never hurt anyone. We just wanted to grow food and raise our daughter in peace." Their 10-year-old daughter, Susan, looked confused. "Why do we have to leave, Daddy? This is our home." Pete knelt down to look his daughter in the eyes. "Sometimes, sweetheart, the people in charge make bad decisions. But we're strong, and we'll find a new home together." On the mining station called Frontier Base, engineer Carol Williams worked day and night to shut down the equipment safely. Her team had spent 8 years building the most advanced mining operation in the galaxy. Now they had to destroy it all, to keep it from falling into alien hands. "It's a waste," said her assistant, Bob Taylor, as they watched the main reactor being dismantled. "We could have fed 100 worlds with what we were pulling out of these asteroids." "Maybe that's what scared them," Carol replied. "Humans who can build better than anyone else. Humans who work harder than anyone else. Maybe they were worried we'd make them look bad. But not all humans were willing to leave quietly." Deep in the Kepler Nebula, a hidden base buzzed with activity. Commander Ryan Mitchell, leader of the elite Ghost Battalion, gathered his best soldiers in the briefing room. These were the toughest fighters humanity had ever produced. Men and women who had volunteered for the most dangerous missions. Council thinks they can just throw us out and forget about us," Mitchell told his assembled troops. "They think we'll go quietly into the dark and never bother them again. They're wrong." Sergeant Danny Cooper, a veteran of 12 combat missions, raised his hand. "What's the plan, sir?" "We disappear," Mitchell said with a cold smile. "We take our ships, our weapons, and our knowledge, and we vanish into the void. But we don't forget. And when the time comes, we'll remind the galaxy why they feared us in the first place." The last human ship crossed the boundary of Council space exactly 29 days after the vote. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching. The stars changed color as they entered the region known as the Outer Rim. This was wild space, empty of planets and full of dangers. It was where the galaxy sent its criminals and outcasts. "So this is our new home," said Dr. Carter, standing beside him. "The place where unwanted things go to die." Morrison shook his head. "No, Lisa, this is where unwanted things go to grow. Strong. The Council thinks they've seen the last of us. They think we'll fade away and be forgotten." He turned to face the woman who had been humanity's voice in the galaxy. "They're about to learn that humans don't fade away. We adapt. We overcome. And we never, ever forget." Behind them, the bridge crew worked quietly at their stations. These were good people, loyal people, who had followed their leaders into exile. Without question. They deserved better than this, but they would make the best of it. As the human fleet disappeared into the darkness between the stars, the galaxy celebrated. Trade routes that had been disrupted by human expansion reopened. Diplomatic tensions that had been caused by human stubbornness faded away. The Galactic Council congratulated itself on making the right choice, but in the cold emptiness of the Outer Rim, humanity was not dying. They were changing. The exile that was meant to be their end would instead become their beginning. The galaxy had made a choice that day to value peace over justice, order over freedom. They would live to regret. That choice